There is a truth that is rarely spoken out loud. Not every Libra is the same. Some people share the same zodiac sign, the same symbol of the scales, yet when they step into life, they carry a completely different rhythm. You may not notice it right away because they are not loud. They do not try to stand out. They do not enter a space with noise or force. But if you are sensitive enough, you will feel that something has shifted, very gently, very quietly, like the moment when the air in a room is adjusted, even though you never saw anyone touch the switch. These Libras tend to move slowly. Their eyes are not in a hurry. They observe more than they react. They listen more than they speak. And somehow, without explanation, without announcement, their presence alone creates an invisible order. Others may not know how to name that feeling, but they feel it. They breathe a little easier. They become a little calmer. And sometimes they become more honest just by being near you. That is not luck. That is a form of power. Some people are born with the ability to realign what is out of balance, not by interfering, but simply by being true to who they are. Libras like this often grow up feeling different, without knowing exactly why. They may have thought they were too sensitive, too aware of other people's emotions, too concerned with fairness in things that seem small to everyone else. But over time, they begin to realize this was never a burden. It was a rare form of awareness. Libras born on these special days were not meant to live in a rush. Their lives rarely follow a straight line. They may take longer to make decisions, not because they lack courage, but because they see more layers within the same situation. They understand that every choice has weight, and they refuse to step onto the scale while things are still unclear. Their slowness is not hesitation. It is respect for consequences. If you are one of them, you may have felt that you do not belong in loud competitions. You are not drawn to winning through words, through power, or through control. You sense that something deeper needs to be protected. A quiet standard, a value that cannot be negotiated. And sometimes, that is exactly what causes you to be misunderstood. Yet deep inside, you know you are standing in the right place. The strongest Libras do not need to prove their strength. They do not need to place themselves at the center. They do not dim others to shine. They understand that true light does not blind. It spreads, it softens. It helps others see themselves more clearly. That is why, even when you say nothing, people still feel your steadiness, a balance that cannot be faked. There is something deeply human about these Libras. They carry the ability to heal without ever trying to become healers. Simply by living in alignment with inner fairness, they help the world around them become a little less distorted. In a society quick to judge, quick to polarize, quick to tilt to extremes, your presence feels like a quiet anchor. No commands, no pressure. Things adjust on their own. And perhaps, as you listen now, you are beginning to realize that this difference was never accidental. It is a gentle reminder that some strengths are not meant to be displayed, but protected. Some people are not born to make noise, but to keep the rhythm of life from drifting off its course. And as you begin to understand how this kind of strength truly works, you may see that what once made you feel out of place has always been the foundation of a strength that is deep, enduring, and almost impossible to shake. And from that foundation, a very different kind of strength begins to take shape. Not loud, not forceful, not built through confrontation. It grows quietly within awareness, like an underground current moving beneath a surface that appears calm. Libras who carry this strength rarely enter conflict with the need to win. They are not drawn to raising their voice. They are not pulled by fleeting emotion. They do not feel the urge to prove who is right and who is wrong. What matters more to them is what is actually happening beneath the words, beneath the actions, beneath reactions that seem obvious on the surface. They understand something essential about human nature. People rarely say what they truly think, and even more rarely do they act in alignment with what they truly feel. That may be why you often sense change before it becomes visible. You feel the air grow heavy even while laughter continues. You notice the eyes that look away even when the words remain polite. You hear the exhaustion hidden inside a response that sounds ordinary. This is not suspicion. And it is not judgment. It is the ability to notice the smallest shifts in rhythm within people and within situations. A sensitivity that only develops when someone is quiet enough to observe without imposing themselves. The strongest Libras rarely place themselves at the center of the story, yet somehow they see the entire picture. They do not need control because they understand that control does not create balance. Awareness does. When you understand why someone reacts the way they do, why a relationship begins to crack, why a system slowly loses stability, you no longer need to fight it. You know when to step back. You know where silence is needed, and you know when presence alone is enough. This is what makes others feel both safe around you and slightly cautious at the same time. Because you are not easily distracted. You are not convinced by appearances. You do not rush to believe what is presented too smoothly. In a world where many live behind masks, the ability to see through them becomes a very clear mirror, and not everyone is ready to look into it. There are moments when you choose silence, not because you have nothing to say, but because you know that speaking too soon would only push things further out of balance. You wait until emotions settle, until motives reveal themselves, until truth no longer needs to be argued. That is the patience of someone who understands that not every battle is worth entering, and not every truth needs to be shouted. This strength also turns you into a quiet timekeeper within many relationships. When things begin to lean too far in one direction, you are often the first to feel it. In your body, in your emotions, in a fatigue that is difficult to explain. Even when you cannot name it right away, you know that if nothing adjusts, something will eventually break. This sensitivity, when misunderstood, may have once made you believe you were weak, but over time, you come to see it for what it truly is. A form of emotional intelligence that is deep, rare, and absolutely necessary. When you move through life with this awareness, you do not need to demand respect. Respect arrives naturally, because others can feel that you see them, truly see them, not through roles, titles, or positions, but through what they leave unsaid. And in that moment, a very different kind of connection forms. Quiet, but enduring. Strong enough to soften tension before it explodes, and steady enough to keep the scales of life from tipping too far away from their natural balance. And when you look back on your own journey, you begin to realize that the day you arrived in this world was never just a random number. Some birth dates carry a very unusual rhythm, something subtle, something distinct, as if the universe whispered a message before you ever took your first breath. For Libras in this group, a birth date is not simply a point in time. It is a doorway, opening into a different level of awareness. Deeper, more refined, more sensitive to what others often miss. You may have grown up feeling that you experience everything more intensely than most people. Sounds seem to linger longer inside you. A glance from someone carries more meaning than the words they choose to say. A tense atmosphere can drain you even before a single sentence is spoken. That sensitivity was never a weakness, even if you were taught to believe it was. It is a sign that your emotional nervous system is finely tuned, precise enough to detect the smallest shifts that others pass right by. There is a very specific kind of gentleness about you, unforced, unpolished, never put on for show. You know how to speak without causing harm. You know how to listen without imposing yourself. You know how to sit with someone in silence without making them feel abandoned. But do not confuse that gentleness with being easy to control. Deep within you, there is a clear internal axis, a set of values that does not move easily. When something crosses that core boundary, you may not react immediately, but you never forget. And once you recognize that an imbalance is real, you adjust your life with quiet decisiveness, even if from the outside it appears gentle, almost effortless. Your silence carries a different quality as well. It is not avoidance, and it is not endurance. It is a space where truth is allowed to reveal itself. Within that silence, you observe, you connect the pieces, you let reality rise to the surface on its own. That is why it is so difficult to defeat you in long-term situations. You do not react from fleeting emotion. You wait until the entire picture becomes clear, and only then do you move. And when you do, It is often the final step, rarely one that needs to be undone. This kind of strength rarely appears early. In your younger years, you may have felt out of sync with the world. You may have wondered why you needed more time to feel safe, why major decisions required deeper reflection than they did for others. But these particular birth dates seem designed for late blooming, not to delay you, but to ensure that when you awaken, you are deep enough not to be swept away. There is usually a moment in life, often after the first encounters with disappointment, betrayal, or loss, when you suddenly realize that all of these experiences have been quietly activating something within you. You begin to trust your intuition more. You stop needing constant validation from the crowd. You start choosing peace over being right. And from that moment on, your strength no longer lies in trying to become someone else, but in allowing yourself to be fully, honestly, who you are. These birth dates are like a hidden promise. A promise that you will not erupt all at once, but once you are steady, you will be very difficult to move. That you were not born to run fast, but to go far. And as you begin to recognize your own rhythm, you also begin to understand that this hidden strength is not meant for competition, but for keeping your life, and sometimes the lives of those around you, from drifting away from the balance that was quietly set in place long before you arrived. And then, as the current of time begins to settle, you start to notice a familiar image appearing again and again in your memory. Moments when you were misunderstood. Times when you were labeled slow, indecisive, too gentle, too soft, too easy to overlook. There may have been moments when you wondered if they were right, if you truly lacked decisiveness, just as they said. But deep inside, there has always been a very small voice, steady and unwavering, quietly reminding you that you were waiting for something clearer. Libras who carry this strength never make choices while their mind is being pulled in multiple directions. You feel emotional chaos very clearly, and you understand that decisions born from chaos always leave an aftershock. So you wait. Not because you are afraid of being wrong, but because you respect the consequences of every step you take. You observe how things unfold, how words shift with emotion, how people reveal their true nature once pressure is removed. In that quiet space, you gather enough information, enough feeling, enough intuition, that guessing is no longer necessary. Some people move quickly and call that courage. You choose clarity instead. And clarity does not arrive in noise. It comes only after everything that needed to be hidden has fully revealed itself. At that point, there is no hesitation left. Your decisiveness is not sharp in a shocking way, but deep, grounded, and solid. Once the scales are still, you move with a calm that often surprises others. No long explanations, no need to persuade, no need to look back. Perhaps that is why so many people once underestimated you. They are used to fast reactions, direct confrontation, and believing that the loudest voice wins. The way you move through the world confuses them. You do not react when provoked. You do not rush to prove yourself when doubted. You do not hurry to defend your ego. But when you walk away, when you choose differently, when you reset your boundaries, they suddenly realize that you had seen everything long before they did. What makes this even more remarkable is that you do not carry bitterness from being misunderstood. You do not use those experiences to close yourself off or become rigid. Instead, they deepen your understanding of people. You know that everyone reacts from their own level of awareness. And because you understand this, you no longer force yourself to fit into someone else's mold. You allow yourself to move at your own rhythm, even if that rhythm is slower than the world around you. Your kindness is not unconditional surrender. It is a conscious choice. You know when to soften. You know when to stop. You understand that not every battle needs to be won, but some values are not open to negotiation. And when someone crosses that line, they meet a very different Libra. Not loud, not dramatic, but deeply unshakable. A kind of firmness that does not need raised voices, because it is already embedded in the way you stand, the way you look, and the way you walk away. Over time, you begin to feel lighter about the old labels placed on you. You no longer need to be understood immediately. You no longer feel the need to explain why you wait, why you stay silent, why you choose differently. You realize that those who truly align with you will sense that steadiness without a single word, and those who do not perhaps never pause long enough to see the entire picture. Within this understanding, you gradually enter a very calm state, not because life no longer brings challenges, but because you no longer doubt the way you move through it. You know now that you were not born to react the fastest, but to choose the truest path. And as you stand firmly in that awareness, something subtle begins to spread. It feels as if the world around you slows down just enough for you to realize that the clarity you have always been waiting for was never outside of you. It was shaped by your ability to see deeply, to wait long enough, and to trust the inner balance you have carried with you for a very long time. And from that inner calm, a very quiet kind of authority begins to move outward around you. Not the authority of a louder voice, and not the authority of forcing others to comply. It is the authority of self-mastery, the kind that only forms when someone has traveled deep enough within to no longer be pulled by the waves outside. Libras who carry this strength have no desire to control anyone. You do not need to arrange how others should live, how they should think, or which choices they should make, according to your standards. You understand that every person has their own path, their own rhythm, and their own lessons to walk through. That respect alone makes you naturally steady. And when you stop trying to hold on, you become the place others choose to lean toward. You also feel no need to win every argument. There are moments when you could say the sharpest thing, end the conversation instantly, and walk away knowing you were right. But you choose not to. Not because you lack clarity, but because you understand that winning an argument does not equal preserving balance. Some truths can only be received when the listener is ready, and you refuse to use pressure to force someone into change. Your silence in those moments is not retreat, it is self-control. You choose to preserve your energy for what truly matters. You do not waste it on proving yourself to those who are not ready to listen. And by doing so, you maintain an inner strength that is clean, stable, and untouched by unnecessary confrontation. You may have noticed something interesting. When you stop trying to persuade, stop trying to explain, stop trying to control outcomes, the world around you begins to adjust on its own. Those who no longer fit drift away without conflict. Situations that once felt tense begin to soften, and relationships that truly matter become visible without you having to hold them together. This happens because when you stand firmly in your values, you emit a very clear frequency. It does not command, it does not force, but it is nearly impossible to ignore. Others sense your boundaries even when you never speak them aloud. They know you are not easily manipulated, not easily pulled into power games, and not easily willing to lose yourself just to keep someone comfortable. That clarity creates a kind of respect that requires no demand. The authority of the strongest Libras comes from never needing to stand above anyone to feel worthy. You do not require constant validation to know you are on the right path. You carry an internal compass precise enough to guide you even when no one walks beside you. And that inner independence is what makes you difficult to shake. Not because you are rigid, but because you understand yourself too deeply to be pulled by standards that were never meant for you. In a society that often celebrates control, imposition, and the loudest voice in the room, the way you move may seem like resistance. But the further you go, the clearer it becomes. That self-mastery brings a very real kind of freedom. You are no longer trapped in constant reaction, no longer pulled into endless comparison. You have space to breathe, space to feel, space to choose with intention. And when you live this way long enough, the world responds. Not by becoming perfect, but by allowing what no longer fits to quietly fall away, and what truly belongs to naturally find you. Your rhythm becomes more harmonious. Not because you control everything, but because you have learned how to stop resisting yourself. Within that self-mastery, there is a feeling that is deep, still, and unmistakable. As if, at last, you are standing exactly where you belong, so everything else can begin to move around you naturally, gently, and in alignment with the order that has always been there. And then there comes a period of time that even if you never gave it a name, your body and your soul remember it clearly. a period when everything seems slightly out of place. Relationships that once felt safe begin to fall out of rhythm. Promises no longer hold their original shape. What you give continues to increase, while what comes back grows thinner, like the last light of day, slowly withdrawing from the sky. You may have asked yourself why you had to walk through that stretch of the road, why the one who always tried to keep the peace ended up feeling the most exhausted, why long silence did not bring calm, but instead made the weight inside heavier. At that time, you did not need answers yet. You only knew that something was asking you to pause, to look deeper, and to be more honest with yourself. This imbalance did not arrive to punish you. It came as a very subtle test. It forced you to face old habits. The habit of giving too much. The habit of reshaping yourself to fit into someone else's space. The habit of staying silent, even when your inner world was filled with unheard voices. Each time you set aside your true feelings to keep the surface calm, you felt a small piece of your energy disappear, tiny but constant. There were nights when you lay still and realized that quiet around you did not mean peace within you. There were mornings when you woke up feeling heavy, with no clear reason why. And in those moments, a question began to form, not loud, but unmistakably clear. Who am I keeping the peace for, and what is it costing me? This cycle shaped a very specific kind of endurance in you. Not endurance born from resignation, but endurance rooted in awareness. You began to recognize the line between compassion and self-erasure. You understood that not every sacrifice is love, and not every silence is noble. Sometimes silence exists simply because it feels safer to protect a familiar order, even when that order is slowly wearing you down. Step by step, you learn to listen to your body before listening to the expectations of others. You realize that when a relationship requires constant self-adjustment just to survive, balance has already been lost. And the moment you dared to acknowledge that, even quietly, something very deep began to shift. True peace, you slowly came to understand, does not come from pleasing everyone. It comes from no longer abandoning yourself to keep the surface smooth. It arrives in the moment you dare to say no, dare to step back, dare to allow space instead of filling every gap with silent sacrifice. At first, this may have felt selfish, but then you realized, for the first time, you were treating yourself fairly. This awakening did not make you cold. On the contrary, it gave your compassion boundaries. You remained understanding. You remained gentle. You still knew how to place yourself in another person's position, but you no longer placed yourself beneath them just to keep them comfortable. Your gentleness now carried the weight of self-respect, and that is what made it sustainable. When you stepped out of that phase, you were no longer the same person, not because you lost your softness, but because you added a steady axis beneath it. You knew you could endure a great deal, but you no longer saw endurance as an obligation. You knew you could be silent, but you no longer used silence to deny your true feelings. And within that clarity, a very different kind of peace began to appear. Not loud, not dazzling, but deep enough for you to recognize that you had passed through an important doorway. Beyond it, your choices, your relationships, and your values began arranging themselves into a new order. One where you no longer stood at the edge of your own life, but firmly within it. And then something very natural begins to happen, even though you never tried to make it happen. People start to look at you differently, not with loud admiration, not with compliments that fade quickly, but with a quiet form of respect, one that forms over time as they realize you are someone who has walked through deep turbulence and still managed to keep hold of something very rare. You are not perfect, and you were never meant to be. You have stumbled. You have made mistakes. You have been tired, confused, and unsure. But there is one thing you did not lose, even in your hardest seasons: your kindness. Not a fragile kind of kindness, but a conscious one. You know what you are giving. You know why you are giving it. And you know when it is time to stop. You do not use kindness to buy acceptance. And you do not use it to convince yourself that you are worthy. People respect you because they can feel that you looked directly at chaos instead of turning away from it. You do not deny the darker sides of human nature. You do not paint reality in soft colors just to make it easier to live with. You see selfishness, fear, and wounds in others and in yourself. But you refuse to let those things turn you into a harsher version of who you are. You choose understanding without excuse. You choose compassion without sacrificing yourself again. There is a balance between empathy and self-respect that is very difficult to reach, and very few people ever do. You learned it through experience, through misplaced trust, through staying silent for too long, and once that lesson settled, you began to move differently. You no longer needed to prove that you are good. You simply lived in alignment, and that was enough for others to feel it. The fairness you carry is not always comfortable. There are moments when you stand alone, not because you are wrong, but because you refuse to choose sides easily. You do not lean toward the crowd just to feel safe. You are willing to hold a balanced perspective even when it leads to misunderstanding. Over time, that consistency builds a very deep kind of trust. People may not agree with you in the moment, but they know you are not speaking from passing emotion. You do not use sharpness to silence others. You use steadiness to soften confrontation. When tension rises, you do not add fuel to the fire. And you do not extinguish it by pretending everything is fine. You stand there, grounded, allowing truth the space it needs to surface on its own. This is leadership without a title, influence without force. Perhaps that is why when people come to you, they come not to be advised, but to be heard. They feel safe telling the truth in your presence. Not because you always agree, but because you do not distort their story. You maintain fairness, even in emotion, and that creates a rare feeling of being respected. This strength does not place you above others. It places you beside them, but steadier. It does not create distance, but it does create boundaries. And in a world full of movement, where people react faster than they reflect, where extremes feel easier than balance, your presence becomes an anchor, not loud, not instructional, but enough to remind others that there are still ways of living that do not wound the world further. People respect you because they see in you a capacity that is difficult to learn. The ability to remain compassionate without tearing yourself apart. The ability to stand firmly in your values without pushing anyone else down. The ability to walk through chaos without losing the original shape of your heart. And as you continue moving forward with that quiet steadiness, you may not notice it right away, but every space you enter, every relationship you touch, shifts just slightly. As if simply by being there, you offer the world one more chance to become a little fairer, a little gentler, and a little more honest. And here, when the noise has finally settled enough for you to hear your own breathing, you may begin to sense why this journey has always carried such a personal meaning. Not everyone is born with the same role. Some people arrive to make noise, others arrive to adjust the frequency. If you are a Libra, born on these days, you belong to the second group. You were never meant to stand in the background so someone else could shine. Even though there were times you placed yourself behind others, times you stepped aside, times you quietly carried more weight so everything around you could remain peaceful. That was never because you were small. It was because you could see the whole picture. And you understood that real light does not need to compete. There is a very quiet mission tied to you, to restore balance where things have been tilted for too long. Not by enforcing rules, but by carrying a clear inner standard. When you are present, falsehood cannot last. When you listen, what has been hidden begins to surface. And when you choose to stand exactly where you belong, not stepping forward to overpower, not stepping back to disappear, everything around you begins to reorganize itself. The light you carry is not blinding. It does not make others squint. It feels like the light at the end of the day, warm enough to soothe, clear enough to guide. You create safety, not by shielding everything, but by helping others see themselves more clearly. In a world out of balance, that is worth more than any form of authority. Your strength is not loud. It does not need immediate recognition. It does not need applause. It lives in the way you choose not to betray yourself, in the way you remain fair even when fairness brings no advantage, in the way you stay open without tearing yourself apart to meet someone else's expectations. This is a deep kind of endurance, one that does not wear down with time, but becomes clearer the longer you walk with it. There may have been moments when you questioned this path, when you wondered why your lessons felt heavier, why balance always seemed to demand a price. But when you look back, you can see that those experiences sharpened a rare inner strength, strong enough to stand steady through major shifts, strong enough to avoid being pulled into extremes, strong enough to keep your heart intact in a world that often hardens people. When you allow yourself to stand in the right place, not higher, not lower, not leaning in any direction just to be liked, you begin to feel a very subtle change. Life does not suddenly become easy, but it becomes clearer. What does not belong gradually falls away. What truly aligns begins to find you, as if a deeper order has been quietly at work, gentle yet precise. And in that moment, you may realize you were never alone. You were simply moving one beat ahead. You hold a role not everyone can see, but many can feel. The role of the balancer. The reminder that strength does not have to be loud, that kindness can exist with boundaries, that fairness still has a place, even when the world tilts. When you live true to that nature, you do not need to convince the universe to stand with you. It shifts on its own, slowly, gently, but unmistakably, and you continue walking, not to change the entire world at once, but so that every place you pass through, every person you touch, has one more chance to return to their own natural balance.